Hello and welcome to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. My name is Mehmet, and as you know, in each episode, I cover different topics from digital transformation, cybersecurity, emerging tech, AI, and sometimes also I have some thought leaders, entrepreneurs who join me to share their insights about the latest trends in the market and how they are trying to help in putting their fingerprints to push things in tech and business. And today I'm very pleased to have with me LaSean Smith, who's joining me from the US. Thank you very much to be here, LaSean. If you can introduce yourself and what you are up to.
Well, pleasure to join you. Great to have this conversation. LaSean Smith, I'm here in the Seattle area of the US, and I'm the founder of Kager Investments. It is a micro private equity firm, and we're focused on building and buying software businesses powered by audience and automation.
That's great. That's great. So, LaSean, today I want to discuss with you a couple of things. So, first of all, the hype, the hype, which is AI, right? So,
Right.
um, like, if you can give us a brief overview from your point and your perspective about how AI can be used and can be a help for solopreneurs. I'm a solopreneur myself, by the way, so I would like to have
Right,
this
right.
insight from you.
Yeah, well, I would start back way back actually on some of the other inflection points, and I would argue maybe this one is more significant than some in the past. But you get this spidey sense. I think back, when Web 1.0 kind of kicked off, and all these software that was on disks and CDs, started to migrate to the web. Um, there was something where you said, hey, this is going to reshape the way certain products get distributed, how we communicate. And we have these inflection points, mobile, web 2.0, all of these various points. And what I find most interesting about the AI conversation is not so much of what's new, but it's enabling things that on some of these previous instances of transformation and change, we probably can finally get right. Sometimes with technology, it's about the timing. So people have great ideas 100 years ago, and we didn't know how to make a flying car. We still don't have a flying car. And so we have these ideas. What to me is really fascinating about AI is that some of the challenges we've had in the past, I think we're finally going to be able to tackle. Now, back to your question on soloprenneurship. What I'm really fascinated about, and I've worked at really large, massive companies. I've worked at startups, and have also been an active solopreneur. And this idea of the solopreneur or the very small indie business that is punching above its weight, many times administrative overhead or other things that aren't really part of the value that the business is delivering is where you get caught up. And we know how to outsource the basics, whether it's legal or accounting or those types of things. But your sales cycle, your customer support, some of these things can start to really be a drain on the calendar. And AI is just going to be able to do a better job. And it's not just about the conversational, UI. There's many more parts of the automation path here. And so what I really think is powerful is looking at technology that's been around for years. Think about, process automation, simple triggers, Microsoft Power Automate or Zapier, these things that aren't new, but when you can start to think how you chain them together with some of these new AI, tools, to me, that's where the magic is going to really unlock.
I loved, the idea of chaining these together. Myself, I've been playing, I would say, with things like no code, automation tools like Zapier and, other ones in the market. And yeah, I can see. But the thing here, some people have some misconceptions, LaSean, right? So whether it's like they don't believe in the tech or sometimes they are afraid of using the tech. So what is your, your thoughts about this?
So the conversation is kind of at a fever pitch at this point. So many folks know the main talking points that, people kind of trot out. Whenever there's technological change, there is this wave of kind of folks getting nervous or, the Luddites come out and they don't want to change anything. And so I won't retread on that front. What I find to be more interesting is kind of my earlier point on When each of these changes have happened in the past, again, let's call out, the web, mobile transition, some of the stuff around mixed reality. There are these moments and these windows where you can really, if you're an entrepreneur or you're an intrapreneur working inside of a large company, you can go create some momentum and value because no one's an expert. So there are these unique periods of time where you get to go kind of create the magic and learn. And so to me, that's where it gets most exciting. And so 100% on things like bias, things like, kind of the hallucination effect that's happening with some of these, just kind of, information. I look at, and we're talking, I think nowadays almost the examples for AI have become ChatGPT. We understand, obviously, it's a much wider surface area than that. But even just with that technology, simply using it as a knowledge retrieval database or some type of tool, to me, that's really short-sighted. And for instance, again, to your question, for folks who are nervous or concerned, I'm like, all right, let's focus on where the real opportunities are today, not, this will be great in 2 years. And like one of the areas I'm most excited is BI insights. A lot of times, we have these dashboards and someone's in their Tableau, Looker, Power BI, and they're just kind of using them as reports. But the power of something like Microsoft Excel paired with Copilot, to me, these are really powerful because you're not going to need to be, very technically savvy to start using this. And the key point to me, again, coming back to the ChatGPT point, is it is a reasoning model. It is not simply just a text prediction model. And so when you think about, well, where do you want to reason? Well, sure, you could use it for copywriting for your sales automation email sequences. Like, to me, that's the easy thing, and folks should do it. I saw a really interesting demo that Apollo has where they're kind of automating the full pipeline of your email, and then you end up with a handful of drafts that you kind of give the once over. That's interesting. To me, what's more exciting is you start looking at some of these new products. Pinecone is in the news, and this scale of vector databases where you just start parking a bunch of unstructured data and you're pointing these large language models toward those databases, and now it starts to reason. And if you think about forecasting or other types of scenarios where you are looking for the action, not just to say, all right, tell me my weekly roll up for the day, what's my month over month growth, like that is not helpful. What is interesting is to start to find and identify unique ways to take action. And, I look at it as having, like this army of consultants or really efficient, college hires who are like the best analysts you've ever hired. Very quickly, you're going to start to get ideas in new ways. And to me, that's one of the most exciting pieces of this tech, because that's ready today.
100%, I have to agree with you, because one of the things that I always talk about, and with every guest that we discuss the topic of AI, that guys, like, don't take only the use case of copywriting. The issue that copywriting came to the picture a lot because this is the easiest, I would say, use case of it. And some of, I would say, people who want to like entertain other people, they just like they shoot TikToks and
Right.
Instagram. I'm saying, guys, like it's not only about this. Yes, it's good in writing text, but I'm really more interested to see as you said, for example, something with Copilot, which is like, personally, I loved also the way that how Microsoft, they call it a co-pilot. It's not here to change, I mean, to kick you from your role.
Exactly.
It is
It's
here
superpower.
it is to help you. So now, moving forward, because you mentioned about how we can leverage this, so do you think we can have at some stage instances of this superpower to help us? Like, think about an army of bots that is working for us. Like, did you imagine the future something like this?
Oh, 100%. So, one of the things that I really love about my job is that we get to run these little experiments. And so, I'm out hunting for companies to acquire. And one of the things we have to figure out is, can we improve the back office or other types of things? I mean, this is like extreme digital transformation. Like that's how we kind of make these deals pencil. And so I have a couple of engineers who have been working on from a UI standpoint, it's very trivial. It's a command line tool. But what it's doing is really stacking a lot of these different pieces of tech together. And what we kind of had this breakthrough, and this was accidental, but we were having like these odd like placeholder names, like this is bot one, bot two, and just kind of in some brainstorming, we said, hey, why don't we name all of these things, and instead of just having like a prompt in a text file or database, let's call that the job description or the functional role. And then let's give each of these things jobs, right? And quickly what we ended up with is a couple dozen, kind of like an organizational set of role guidelines. And we started letting these things talk to each other. And that was like a huge unlock, right? So imagine you do have a copywriter, but maybe you also have, other roles. We have one called knowledge manager. And the job of that is to basically just take data in and store it somewhere, right? And so now it's almost like the librarian of the company. And so we can chain things together where the copywriter can go fetch something from the knowledge manager. We have a business analyst that goes and like kind of trucks through things. And because the tech isn't quite ready to like throw all of that in together, this small little, it's more of a hack for the humans using the tech than it is for the tech, but it allows us to kind of compartmentalize some of the different pieces. But then when you sequence them together, you have these workflows that are quite powerful. And that's where I'm, again, really, really interested is like, how can we take some of these paradigms that we would have if we were going to build up a real team and start assigning and delegating that as if you're managing, this bot army, if you will, or bot workforce.
Wow, because I was trying to do something similar, but on a
Yeah.
smaller scale. So the idea I had, which is, like how, for example, any business, they have some departments, let's say sales, marketing, HR. And then what I tried to do is like, I call it the AI brainstormer actually. So I've built a prototype where you just have pre-selected prompts that the client can choose, like his industry, or he can add like few things, and then it goes and it will give you this. So this is one of the small use cases that I can see it can be implemented. But what do you think, like now we have the technology, it's available for us. Now, for people like myself, and there are a lot of, and this is like, it seems a trend now being a solopreneur, right? So what do you think like would be the best examples of implementing a successful 24/7 workforce by AI?
Yeah, well, one of the things that and you may have heard this concept or different name, talent stacking is where I spend a fair amount of my time coaching and mentoring folks who are earlier in their career. And when I'm talking about AI and brainstorming new product ideas, I come back to talent stacking as really critical because it's the combination of your unique experience and skill set. And what I want folks to do is to really start to say, all right, what makes me, a unique one of one? And then what are the parts that I can obviously outsource? They're rules-based, they're commoditized, even if they're valuable, let someone else do them. And then what makes me unique? And so, knowledge and skilling is very important. And I think there's a whole class of enterprise opportunities to take what's happened more on the consumer side, where the knowledge economy has been booming for years. And now, you've probably, met folks who were a corporate trainer and they would just fly around the world or things like that. I believe there's going to be a whole new category of work where there's someone who is an expert at a certain capability, a certain function. They have years of expertise, and we're going to be able to package it up in new and different ways. And so, to me, that's one of the biggest things I'm excited about is just knowledge transfer, training up, other individuals, whether they are solopreneurs themselves or working at companies. And again, I come back to examples that aren't like the earth-shattering, like, here's the thing that's never been done before. It's like, no, here's a thing that is proven to have demand that we can now do at a much higher kind of value proposition, and it's sustainable. You're not going to burn yourself out by having to fly all around 300 days a week or a year rather, to really land these types of businesses. And so that to me is where it's most magical.
Yeah, and this has brought to me now a quick question, because solopreneurs at the end of the day, they are entrepreneurs, and they have to be flexible, they have to be agile, they have to pivot fast. Do you think that this generation of AI would help solopreneurs to validate their ideas much faster and be able to iterate on a faster pace?
100%. And so if you think about, customer signal being at the core of, kind of whether a business lives or dies, it's not just about, product market fit. If you're a startup and you're chasing some, value proposition that's never been proven, you really have to figure out, do customers even want this, right? But even before you get there, the whole business has to run on iteration speed. And there's a great talk from the CEO of Intercom that just talks about how the speed of which your business can iterate is really going to be one of the biggest predictors on whether you can succeed. And for a solopreneur, that gets tricky sometimes because you're trying to manage your calendar. Quick sidebar hack, what I do is I do something called calendar logging. And what it means is it's kind of using your calendar as a diary. So I obviously have the things in the future that are booked, but after I complete my day, and I'm doing this sometimes during the course of the day, I'm going back and updating things where I cheated. I had a block of time. I was supposed to write this email. I didn't do this. I went and researched something else. I cheated even worse, and I watched some YouTube. And this is really important. What I find really interesting about that type of behavior is you can start to train, a bot to go be your calendar analyst and start to think about better ways for you to use your time. For me, for instance, I try to block out, deep thinking time, meeting with the leaders of my portfolio companies, hanging out, going to meetings, and then just my research. I try not to have too much multitasking or context switching around those, try to block them in days. But I always, do something wrong. And so that's like a quick hack that I've done. And I'm really interested in how those scenarios can come back. But back to the, the iteration speed, imagine today you have an NPS survey. And if you're a solopreneur, you're a company of one, you're going to get this NPS survey. You probably don't have a large sample size, right? Because you're not probably serving a ton of customers. And it's like, what do you do with this? And so imagine, you can start to get, not just sales automation or customer support, but start using these bots to go collect more signal on what's the pain point. And if you could effectively have a user research, these PhDs, obviously aren't going to be replaced by chat GPT, at least not how they currently work. But you could give every one of your customers this UR specialist who's going to say, tell me more about your problem. And that's just one example of moving beyond what today is largely forms over data. And that to me is, if we get kind of more macro at all of this, that is one of the things I'm most excited about, because SaaS products today largely are people typing into web forms. Some are fancy, some are not, but they're still kind of crud in nature to a large degree. And if you start to think about unattended SaaS, not just, SaaS that, is kind of, the co-pilot type things, the big tech companies are going to be great at that. I'm sure Salesforce and Google and Microsoft, everyone's going to have a great kind of sidebar that gives you these superpowers. But imagine another class of experiences where it's truly headless. And it's kind of, running these jobs on your behalf. And one of those, I would imagine, would be the ability to talk to your customers and really get to the source of their pain, and also the right time. It's not interrupting the customer while they're trying to complete a task or while they're not interested. And so to be able to collect all that data without having humans type into a form, and then aggregate it and then get to some insights. Okay, now you're talking about UR, you're talking about product management, you're taking all of these things that historically you would need to go hire a fractional resource or hire a full-time employee, and now the solopreneur is going to have access to a lot of those capabilities.
Great. And this again, another question came to my mind because of this. You mentioned how the big companies will do great in this integration. Now, we know the fact that every big tech company tries to be, they follow the 0 to 1, right? We know this. So they are the network. Do you think, but there will be space for solopreneurs to play in this field? Or do you think the big tech will dominate and there will be no room for others in this game?
Yeah, so this is one where it's easy to say words. And so I'm not going to try to predict. Again, if you give it a long enough time horizon, I think it's really easy to predict the future. But in the short term, over the next year or so, I think that's a bit trickier. What I do believe is the large data models or the large models that require a really large data set, those are going to be regulated just from a capital expense to some of the large players. And, folks who are now figuring out what the right, UI design patterns are going to be, there will be little pockets in certain verticals. Someone's going to have an ag tech play, someone's going to have an ed tech play, someone's going to have fintech. Like, they're going to figure out these unique things, and over time we'll quickly realize that these design patterns are maybe a bit more universal. You saw this with mobile, where folks took desktop applications and they try to cram them down to a phone, and we're like, oh, this is dumb. And then over time we found the right design patterns, and now those are pretty commonplace. And every once in a while you have someone totally rethinking UI on a mobile application, but customers they come to use and interact with things in a very familiar way. And so we've had kind of a set of standards. And so I call that out because there'll be a window, I think, of this time where folks will be inventing those things, but those aren't really defensible. Those aren't moats. And so they're going to find their way back to some of these. So a lot of those big pieces, those big rocks, I'm not sure there's long-term opportunity for the small player. Where I get really excited, and I do think there's going to be opportunities for the solopreneur, is any place where rapid iteration is going to be rewarded. Two reasons. Number one, big companies just won't be able to move that quickly. But number two, many of the people inside of these companies, they don't want to lose their job. They don't want to take the risk. They're trying to protect the status quo. And I can understand the psychology of why they may behave that way, but there's going to be tons of arbitrage opportunities that are going to keep surfacing. And, to my earlier point, they're going to get shut down quickly, right? Like, this will be a 6-month opportunity, a 9-month opportunity, an 18-month opportunity. And then someone will oh, we should probably just roll this as a feature or, a product into our larger suite. And if you're a small player, you're going to be able to go and exploit some of these arbitrage opportunities, create value for folks. And I have a really simple rule in how we run our business. We're not focused on market share. It's just free cash flow. And so for the solopreneur who is really trying to generate real cash, that runway is going to unlock the next wave of arbitrage. And that, to me, that chaining, I believe we're going to be in a decade of this, right? The same way, kind of once we had the iPhone 4 moment, was that 2000, was that 7 or 2003? 7. And so we had a run where every year there was something new. Oh, this new camera. Oh, there's this new depth sensor. Oh, you got GPS. And so the large players just couldn't react fast enough because, even if you look at now what OpenAI and Microsoft are announcing, I know this is a very coordinated PR approach from them, but over the last 2 weeks, it's like 5, 6 announcements that could be like a whole quarter's worth of PR in a typical news cycle. And so companies aren't going to be able to react fast enough to take advantage of these platforms to build interesting things. And that's an opportunity, I believe, for solopreneurs.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. It's the best PR ever I have seen in years. Especially from OpenAI and Microsoft, as you said, because they're delivering a vision where, I'm not associated with anyone, right? But the way they are presenting that this technology, how it can be helpful, it's at least quieting the noise that is coming. Oh, this is going to, hundreds, thousands of people will lose their jobs. Like, um, even I read like weird stuff. AI will wake up and kill us, like all these things. I'm happy they are doing this kind of PR, and especially, with whatever they did with Copilot for the office tools and for the
For
coding.
GitHub. Yep.
Yes, the coding part and the cybersecurity part. Like really, it's a promising technology. Now, what do you think other than AI, like for solopreneurs, where other technologies could also play a role to help them? Like, I believe like you would say automation, but anything else that can come to your mind?
Well, even beyond technology, and I'll come back to that point, one of the biggest gaps I see across the workforce, whether it's a business of one or a large company, is people just are not embracing being really effective writers. And the reason I think that's such an important skill, whether it's more creative and sales copywriting, or it is business writing, my background in big tech is very document heavy. Working in meetings where you had to write everything down. The reason that is, I believe, an undervalued skill is in a remote first workforce, which many companies are embracing. As a solopreneur, you're almost by definition, remote, because everyone you're interacting with is probably not with you. Your ability to write enables you to move more quickly with async communication. So you can write something and then you can move on. And the idea that the computer is going to write that for you, no way, right? Like this is not the skill. That type of writing is not what these things can do today. And so the ability to be an amazing writer, to me, is super, super important. And once you can be able to write, you can direct a bunch of resources. One of those, and I don't know why this isn't talked about more often, but part of my journey has been, again, these big companies as well as tiny little companies. And if you remember years ago, there was this talk about the consumerization of IT. Do you remember that
Yeah.
dialogue where it's just like, we don't need these ugly interfaces, and usability should be improved? I almost look at it as the other way. There are really smart and thoughtful design and architectural patterns, at the enterprise. Let's take basic things like, data lakes or a system of record. Every solopreneur should be thinking, what is their system of record? Because the more you can start to bring this data together, whether it's in a very structured format, it could be as simple as an Excel file and some Airtable, right? It doesn't have to be complicated, but the more you can start to pull this together, the more you can start to really lean into process optimization. And it's really hard when, you got some stuff in a text file, some stuff in an email, some stuff in a doc. So the idea that you can, start thinking of a system of record the way a large company would, let's say you're a big bank or a financial institution, they're going to be really thoughtful about what is the system of record, what's the system of engagement on top of that, and then what's the system of insights and intelligence. And if you don't aggregate that all together, that's going to be broken. And so any source or any tool, again, I love tabular data because it's one of the easiest for people to manipulate, without a ton of kind of technical expertise. So I can teach someone how to use, Excel or something like that very quickly. Those are some of the pieces of tech that are going to be, I think, applicable to almost any knowledge worker. And then this is maybe a bit more niche, but for frontline workers or any place where, the laptop is not handy, or you need two hands, integrating more media, whether it is photos or videos, and ingesting that to some of these new analytics and data storage where you're triggering insights, whether it's computer vision based or otherwise, to say like, all right, how many pallets are supposed to be in this warehouse? And you don't need to have somebody walk over there and count those. Again, these are big ideas that have been around in the enterprise for years. These types of technologies, I think, are going to find their way, to these businesses of one.
Love that, LaSean. Like it's bringing, the power of data to individuals, right?
Right.
I love this, and I think I start to see a couple of attempts, I would say. So you see now people building templates, like some of them in Excel, some of them in Notion, some of them, in different of these tools, and they are
Right.
calling them, the, let's say, the entrepreneur operating system.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I love this approach, but what you just said is something like, it's like leapfrog, I would say, because you're trying to get the analytics and all this. Now, just a final question before we close. What is your advice for solopreneurs, whether, it's related to the AI and how they can automate their works, and, just a general also advice from your side, because you have this experience.
Well, I would say three things. And the first one is an obvious one, but I will state it, with all of the chatter going on right now with AI, I'm not sure it's overhyped. I really do think this is going to be transformational. We might get the timing wrong on certain capabilities within this, but I don't believe that it's overhyped. However, you can't just look at your news feed and say, oh, now I'm up to speed. And I think every solopreneur should go, and this can be tricky if you're running your business, of one, go find 40 hours and go try out all of these tools. Last year, when Dolly and Stable Diffusion and Midjourney and these other things were going on the image generation side, they were very clumsy, right? You had to go in this Discord group for Midjourney. You had to go, fiddle with these Jupyter notebooks for, for some of the Stable Diffusion stuff, and it's kind of like, it's painful, right? Because you're like, I'm learning this thing that's probably a throwaway skill because, Adobe or somebody, they just actually announced something. They're just going to give you the UI. But to give your brain more cycles, I think it's really important and helpful to, go invest. And I just would block 40 hours as soon as you can to go get some more hands-on. And then your unique talent stack is going to unlock something where you realize, see an opportunity, or you see a weakness that maybe is being hyped and isn't quite ready for prime time. So that's number one. Number two, going back to being a great writer, the interface for many of these tools are going to be text or voice, and your ability to speak concisely in a very actionable way. I look at these bots as interns ready to be trained up to be effective team members, and when you look at through that lens, you got to manage your team. You don't get to just say, hey folks, go do some work. And so the ability to start figuring out, not just prompt engineering, but really start thinking about how you can manage this technology as if it was a team, that's pretty powerful. And this is a team that they're not going to call in sick, they're always ready to work, but they're going to do basically what you tell it to do. And your ability to be a great writer, I believe, will be really critical to that. And then lastly, I think having conversations with other solopreneurs. I haven't figured out the pithy 5 things that every solopreneur needs to know about AI. And I would posit in the next year or so, that's going to be a lot easier to articulate because we're going to see all these pieces come together. And so if folks want to get ahead of the curve, creating their own group of 3 to 5 peers who are also trying to explore and having a conversation a couple times a month, that I think is going to get the unlock. And so if you pair that with being a great writer and you have some hands-on expertise, you're going to have single person companies kind of delivering the value of a 30, 40, 50 person company. And that to me is super exciting.
That's great. LaSean, I was really happy to have you with me today on the show. I hope like everyone would be excited about the future that LaSean explained to us, whether you are a solopreneur, whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you are still working in the corporate world. I will keep in the episode details and the contacts of LaSean if you want to connect with him maybe on LinkedIn or know more about his company. And as usual, if you have any questions, if you have any feedback about this episode or about the show in general, please don't hesitate to reach out to me by email or through the social media, LinkedIn and Twitter. And if you want to also join me on the show, I'm available for you. You can again ping me and we can discuss how we can arrange this together. And don't forget to subscribe if you are watching this on YouTube, or if you are listening through your favorite podcasting platform. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much, and until we meet next time.